Vladimir Putin has told the world that Russia is gearing up for a mass vaccination program in October.
Сегодня утром впервые в мире зарегистрирована вакцина против новой коронавирусной инфекции.
The key word here is registered, after less than 2 months of human testing on fewer than 100 people. Russian researchers are actually behind several other groups in the US and China. In terms of the science, they've bent the rules around approval.
My initial reaction was it was probably much ado about nothing. We don't know anything about this vaccine other than the fact that Vladimir Putin got on the airwaves and said, this is going to be safe, this is going to be effective, and one can only interpret this as a political stunt.
So what's missing? The most essential step in proving a vaccine is safe, called Phase 3. It's the last phase of human trials, and it usually involves tens of thousands of people.
So without that Phase 3 data yet, I'm very concerned that they will be using and releasing a vaccine that could potentially be unsafe, could potentially be just ineffective.
Russia passed laws in April that would allow companies working on vaccines to bypass Phase 3 trials. Other countries have also changed or accelerated the process by which vaccines are made. China okayed a vaccine for military use before publishing Phase 3 trial results. And in the United States, companies funded by the Operation Warp Speed program are overlapping multiple phases of clinical trials. Still, Putin has confidently claimed to have tested the Russian vaccine on his own family.
Одна из моих дочерей сделала себе такую прививку. Думаю, что в этом смысле она поучаствовала в эксперименте, чувствует себя хорошо и титры высокие.
There are currently more than 100 coronavirus vaccines in development globally. Researchers around the world are in a race against time and each other. But developing any new vaccine typically takes years, sometimes up to a decade. So far, only a handful of groups in the US and UK have entered Phase 3. Their plans for deployment are, as of now, a bit less ambitious than Russia's. In the United States, the Trump administration partnered with the private sector to deliver 300 million doses by January 2021, and China has already offered an experimental vaccine to employees of state-run companies. The first country that proves it can produce a safe and effective vaccine stands to gain billions of dollars of foreign investment. The vaccine will be marketed as Sputnik V, a nod to the world's first satellite, Sputnik 1, which the Soviet Union launched in 1957, escalating the 20-year space race with the US. As many as 20 countries have already expressed interest, perhaps putting Sputnik V in the lead of a biotech Cold War.
I hope it's not a Cold War. Certainly, this pandemic has been an equal opportunity employer. This virus affects all nations, all ethnic backgrounds, all religious groups. We should all be brought together in this effort because all of us are at risk. I think what Vladimir Putin has done is political theater.
Russia's vaccine is being developed at the Gamaleya Institute in Moscow. But in July, American, British, and Canadian intelligence services accused Russian hackers of trying to steal vaccine-related information from researchers abroad, according to the New York Times. And there have been widespread reports that scientists injected themselves with the prototype and rushed through other tests to speed up the development.
So when people talk about this being a race, I say be careful what you wish for, because history tells us when you look at the modern history of the U.S. vaccine program, the first vaccines out are usually replaced within a year or two by better vaccines.
Dr. Peter Hotez has researched vaccines for other coronaviruses for decades, and they are notoriously difficult. He says that the only way nations can solve a pandemic is by cooperating.
I think we have to get away from this business of this nationalism around vaccines, calling it the American vaccine or the Chinese vaccine or the British vaccine. It doesn't work that way.
Historically, nations have come together.
This concept of vaccine diplomacy, how you build vaccines jointly between nations at the height of the Cold War, and the two countries put aside their ideologies to work together. They did that for polio, and they wound up doing that for the freeze-dried smallpox vaccine as well.
Those studies that were done in the then Soviet Union were instrumental in getting Sabin's oral polio vaccine licensed in the United States.
And many Russians never considered the coronavirus to be a serious threat.
So people didn't take it seriously in the beginning. Russian propaganda tried to present coronavirus as a part of some great foreign conspiracy against Russia.
So even if the Russian vaccine doesn't work, Putin has little to lose politically from approving it.
So he needed to enforce his image like a savior, a defender, like someone who can make Russia great again. So if we are talking about people's life, yes, it's a huge risk. But if we are talking about Putin political and informational risks, I don't think they're too high.
Putin's announcement could be a tactic to destabilize the vaccine process in other countries and potentially undermine trust in vaccines in Russia and abroad. Tara Smith studies vaccine hesitancy at Kent State University in Ohio.
You have that ripple effect that, well, if this one is not working or if this one causes side effects, well, what about, measles? What about tetanus? What about pertussis? It can drive fear for those as well.
If the Russian vaccine does prove to be safe and effective, manufacturing enough doses to share with the world would be a tremendous challenge.
If the intention is to vaccinate 8 million people in the world, that's going to require something that's never been done before.
Dr. Stanley Plotkin is the godfather of the rubella vaccine, one of the most common vaccines given to infants. He says there's no plan in place for worldwide collaboration.
We'd have to suspend antitrust laws and allow collaboration between companies, and the companies would have to agree in some cases to manufacture somebody else's vaccines. The only way that will be possible is if we have some sort of agreement now between companies, whether brokered by the WHO or somebody else. I don't see that happening yet.
The World Health Organization has said it is discussing the new COVID-19 vaccine with Russian health authorities.
We hope that some of these vaccines will prove to be safe and efficient, and that you will be able to get doses that will be then distributed in an equal way.
They have now about 14 vaccines that they're moving forward with. The hard part comes, as you note, with what happens next. I mean, the hardest part of this is going to be implementation and distribution of these vaccines.
Russian officials confirmed that phase 3 trials for their vaccine moved forward with 2,000 volunteers on August 12th, one day after the announcement of the vaccine's approval. Mass production of the vaccine could begin as soon as September, a month earlier than results are expected from phase 3 trials for Moderna, the U.S. company furthest along in the process. Russia was approaching 1 million reported cases in mid-August, putting it fourth on the list of countries with the most confirmed infections in the world. More than 15,000 Russians have died.